They called me crazy? Look who's laughing now.
My wife abandoned me when I was diagnosed with cancer at 29. "You're too expensive to save," she said. Real classy, right? 5 years later, I'm still here, still breathing, still working 3 jobs to pay off the medical debt she helped create before she walked out with her designer bags and zero conscience. My name is Eli Carver, and I used to think the worst thing that could happen to a man was getting cancer. Turns out I was wrong. The worst thing is surviving it only to discover your wife was planning your funeral while you were planning your recovery. I'm 34 now, living in Millbrook, one of those forgotten Northeast towns where the biggest excitement is usually who got arrested outside the Pine Knot on Saturday night. I drive Uber during the day, fix cars when I can find the work, and stock shelves at the grocery store on weekends. It's not glamorous, but it keeps the lights on in my rented craftsman house with its creaky floors and basement that floods every spring. That Tuesday morning in October started like any other. I was under the hood of Mrs. Patterson's ancient Honda when someone knocked on my garage door. I figured it was another neighbor needing a quick oil change, so I wiped my hands on my coveralls and opened up. Instead, I found a man in an expensive suit holding a leather briefcase. He looked like he'd stepped out of a law firm commercial. All polished shoes and perfect haircut. "Eli Carver?" he asked. "That's me. You lost?" "Daniel Freeman, attorney at law." He handed me a business card that felt heavier than my weekly grocery budget. "I have some documents regarding a medical research inheritance. The donor specifically requested you." I stared at him. "I think you've got the wrong guy. I don't know anyone with inheritance money. May I come in?" This is rather sensitive. Something in his tone made me step aside. He followed me into my small living room, looking around at my secondhand furniture and stack of medical bills on the coffee table. If he was judging, he kept it to himself. "Mr. Carver, are you familiar with the Brennan Medical Research Foundation?" "Never heard of it." "The foundation recently received a substantial donation from an anonymous benefactor, $63 million to be exact." He paused, watching my reaction. "The donor left specific instructions that you should receive a significant portion of those funds." I sat down hard on my couch. $63 million? You're joking." "I assure you I'm not." He opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. "However, there's been a complication. Your ex-wife, Veronica, and her current partner, Derek Ames, have been contesting the inheritance. They're claiming you're mentally unfit to receive such a sum." The mention of Veronica's name hit me like a punch to the gut. I hadn't seen her in 3 years, not since the divorce was finalized. Last I heard, she was living in a fancy townhouse across town, working as a marketing executive and dating some pharmaceutical sales guy. "What exactly are they claiming?" Freeman pulled out a stack of photos and documents. "They've submitted testimony suggesting your cancer treatment affected your mental capacity. They're also claiming the inheritance is fraudulent because you allegedly exaggerated your medical condition." I flipped through the papers, my hands shaking slightly. There were medical records I'd never seen, statements from people I barely knew, and photos of me during my worst days of chemo. Someone had been building a case against me for months. Who would leave me this money? And why? The donor insisted on anonymity, but I can tell you they were very specific about your eligibility. They mentioned your courage during your illness and your character in the face of abandonment. Freeman leaned forward. "Mr. Carver, I believe you have a strong case, but we need to move quickly. Your ex-wife has hired an aggressive legal team." After Freeman left, I sat in my garage for an hour, staring at the inheritance documents. $63 million. It was more money than I could comprehend. Enough to pay off every debt, buy a real house, maybe even help other cancer patients who couldn't afford treatment. But Veronica was trying to take it away from me. Again. That evening, I drove to the Pine Knot, needing a beer and some familiar faces. The bar was exactly what you'd expect in a town like Millbrook. Dim lighting, sticky floors, and the kind of regulars who knew everyone's business before they did. I was halfway through my first beer when I spotted them. Veronica and Derek, sitting in a corner booth, looking like they owned the place. She was even more polished than I remembered. All sleek hair and expensive clothes. He was exactly what I'd pictured. Gym-built, designer stubble, the kind of guy who probably called everyone buddy and talked too loud about his car. They were laughing about something, and I caught fragments of their conversation as I moved closer to the bar. "Can't believe he's actually fighting it," Veronica was saying. "I mean, look at him. 3 jobs, and he still can't afford decent clothes." The guy's delusional if he thinks he deserves that money, Derek replied. Didn't you say the cancer thing was mostly in his head anyway? I gripped my beer bottle tighter, mostly in his head, like the months of chemo, the surgery, the nights I spent throwing up while she complained about missing her yoga classes because I was too sick to drive myself to treatment. Oh, absolutely, Veronica continued. Eli always was dramatic. I'm sure he played up the symptoms for sympathy. You should have seen him during treatment, acting like he was dying when it was just a little tumor. A little tumor. The thing that nearly ended me was a little tumor. I was about to walk over and introduce myself to Derek properly when my phone buzzed with a notification. Someone had tagged me in a social media post. I opened the app and felt my blood run cold. Tiffany Morrison, Veronica's best friend and wannabe influencer, had posted a video with the caption, "Throwback to when some people fake cancer for attention # truth # fake news # attention seeker." The video was old footage from my treatment, probably taken by Veronica when I wasn't looking. I was bald, thin, and obviously sick, but Tiffany had added text overlays suggesting it was all an act. In just 2 hours, it had been shared over 1,000 times. I looked back at Veronica and Derek. They were watching me now, smirking like they'd just played the perfect hand in poker. Veronica raised her glass in a mock toast, and Derek actually had the audacity to wink. That's when I realized something important. They thought they were hunting me, gathering evidence and building their case to take away the one good thing that had happened to me in years. But they'd made a crucial mistake. They'd forgotten that I was a survivor. And survivors don't just lie down and die. They fight back. The next morning, I called in sick to my grocery store shift and spent the day learning everything I could about my enemies. Funny how easy it is to gather intelligence when you drive Uber in a small town. People talk in the back seat like you're invisible, and they leave their phones unlocked, and sometimes they even ask you to drive them to places they probably shouldn't be going. My first stop was Derek Ames. According to his social media, he was a pharmaceutical sales manager who spent most of his time posting gym selfies and pictures of expensive meals. His LinkedIn said he worked for Morrison Pharmaceuticals, and his Instagram suggested he lived like he was making 7 figures. But something didn't add up. I'd learned to spot financial desperation during my own broke years, and Derek had all the signs. Designer clothes that were slightly out of season, a BMW that was 3 years old but photographed like it was new, restaurant check-ins that were always lunch specials, never dinner. I got lucky around noon when Derek requested an Uber to a business lunch across town. He didn't recognize me. 5 years and 50 pounds of healthy weight gain will do that, and he spent the entire ride on his phone. "Yeah, Mom, I know the rent's late again," he was saying. "The Veronica thing is going to pay off big time. Trust me, we're talking millions here." He paused, listening to whoever was on the other end. "No, she doesn't know about the credit cards. Look, once we get this inheritance money, I can pay everything back and she'll never find out. This Eli guy is a joke. Who's going to believe some broke cancer patient over a successful marketing executive?" I kept my face neutral as I dropped him off at Romano's, an upscale Italian place downtown. Through the window, I watched him meet with a woman in a business suit. Their body language was tense, and she kept pointing at documents spread across the table. When she got up and walked away without shaking his hand, Derek's confident facade cracked just enough for me to see the desperation underneath. That afternoon, I had another piece of luck. Tiffany Morrison, yes, Morrison, as in Morrison Pharmaceuticals, requested a ride to Veronica's townhouse. She was even more vapid in person than online, spending the entire 10-minute drive taking selfies and complaining about her haters. "People are so jealous," she was saying to her phone camera. "Just because I'm brave enough to expose fake cancer doesn't mean I'm the bad guy. Some people will do anything for money and attention." I wanted to slam on the brakes and tell her exactly what fake cancer looked like, but I had bigger plans now. Instead, I made a mental note of Veronica's address and the security code Tiffany punched into the gate. That evening, I met with my cousin Marty at the Pine Knot. Marty had done a stretch in county jail for burglary, but he'd gone straight since getting out. Mostly. He drove for the same rideshare company I did, and he had a talent for acquiring information that people didn't necessarily want to share. "So you want to know about your ex-wife's boyfriend," Marty said, sliding into the booth across from me. "That's some premium stalker behavior, cuz. It's not stalking if they're trying to steal my money." "Fair point." Marty pulled out his phone. "Derek Ames, age 38, works for Morrison Pharmaceuticals. Guess who owns Morrison Pharmaceuticals? Tiffany's family? Bingo. Daddy Morrison is loaded, but little Tiffany doesn't get her trust fund until she's 35. Guess how old she is? 31. Smart man. Now guess who's been helping Derek keep his job even though his sales numbers are garbage? The pieces were clicking together. Tiffany. And guess who introduced Derek to your ex-wife? Also Tiffany. Marty grinned. You always were quick. Here's the kicker. Derek's been skimming from his expense account. Nothing huge, just enough to keep up appearances. But if Morrison Pharmaceuticals ever audited him properly, he'd be fired and probably prosecuted. Exactly. So he needs money, and he needs it fast. Enter one wealthy widow with an inheritance case. I'm not dead, Marty. Details. He leaned back in his chair. The question is, what are you going to do about it? I thought about that for a long time. The old me, the guy who'd been too sick and too broken to fight back when Veronica left, would have probably hired a lawyer and hoped for the best. But I wasn't that guy anymore. Cancer had burned away a lot of things, including my willingness to be a victim. I'm going to give them exactly what they deserve, I said finally. That sounds ominous. Good. The next few days, I put my plan into motion. First, I needed evidence of what they were really up to. Veronica's townhouse had decent security, but it also had a cleaning service that came every Thursday morning. It wasn't hard to follow the cleaning van and strike up a conversation with the crew chief during their lunch break. Yeah, Mrs. Carver's place, the guy said when I mentioned Veronica's address. Nice lady. Tips well. Always leaves her old phones and tablets lying around, though. We're supposed to dust around them, but sometimes they end up in weird places. Old phones? She upgrades like every 6 months. Keeps the old ones in a drawer in her kitchen. Probably has her whole life on those things. That Thursday, while Veronica was at work and the cleaning crew was on their lunch break, I let myself into her townhouse using the gate code I'd memorized. I'm not proud of breaking and entering, but I'm not ashamed of it either. Sometimes you have to fight dirty when people are trying to destroy you. The kitchen drawer was exactly where the cleaning guy said it would be. 3 old smartphones, all still charged, all still logged into her social media accounts. I spent 20 minutes going through her photos, messages, and videos, transferring the most interesting ones to a flash drive. What I found was better than I'd hoped for. Photos of Derek and Veronica in compromising positions, sure, but also screenshots of their text conversations about the inheritance case. Messages between Veronica and Tiffany planning their social media campaign against me. Even a voice memo of Derek practicing his testimony for the court hearing. But the real goldmine was a video Veronica had recorded for her own records. In it, she was coaching Derek on what to say about my cancer treatment. Remember, you need to sound concerned, not malicious, she was saying. Say you're worried about his mental state, that the chemo might have affected his judgment. Don't mention the money directly. Let them draw their own conclusions. Derek was nodding along. What if they ask about his medical records? I've got copies of everything from when we were married. I'll highlight the parts about depression and anxiety. Make it sound like he was unstable even before the cancer. And the inheritance thing? Tiffany's already planted the seeds online. If enough people share her posts, it'll look like public opinion is against him. No judge wants to give millions to someone the internet thinks is a fraud. I sat in my car outside her townhouse, watching that video over and over again. They weren't just trying to steal my money. They were trying to destroy my reputation, my credibility, everything I'd built back up after surviving cancer. That's when I stopped feeling guilty about what I was planning to do to them. That's when I started feeling excited about it. The beauty of Derek's BMW was that it was his pride and joy, his most visible symbol of success, and also his biggest weakness. He posted pictures of it constantly, parked it in the most visible spots wherever he went, and probably spent more on detailing it than I made in a month, which made it the perfect target for my opening move. I'd been planning something subtle, maybe a few scratches or a flat tire, but then I remembered a nature documentary I'd watched about locusts. Sometimes the most effective attack is the one that seems completely random until you realize how much thought went into it. Marty knew a guy who ran a reptile supply business out of his garage. For $50, I walked away with a cardboard box containing 500 live crickets, the kind used to feed lizards and snakes. They were loud, they were active, and they were absolutely perfect for what I had in mind. Derek's routine was predictable. Every Friday after work, he went to Murphy's gym for an hour, then stopped by the Pine Knot to network, which mostly meant buying drinks for anyone who would listen to him talk about his sales numbers. He always parked his BMW in the same spot, right under the streetlight where everyone could see it. That Friday, I waited until he'd been inside the bar for 20 minutes, then made my move. Derek was the kind of guy who never locked his car in a small town. Too trusting, too arrogant, too sure that nothing bad would ever happen to him. I opened all 4 doors and carefully released the crickets throughout the interior. Under the seats, in the glove compartment, in the cup holders, even a few in the air vents. Then I closed everything up and walked into the bar like nothing had happened. Derek was holding court near the pool table, regaling a group of locals with some story about closing a big pharmaceutical deal. I ordered a beer and found a spot where I could watch the show. The secret to sales, Derek was saying, is making people believe they need what you're selling. Take my girlfriend's ex-husband guy, thinks he's entitled to millions just because he had a little health scare. But when you really examine the facts, he never got to finish that sentence because that's when the screaming started. Someone outside was yelling about bugs, and then we heard a car alarm going off. Derek's face went from confident to confused to horrified as he realized the commotion was coming from the direction of his precious BMW. The entire bar emptied out to see what was happening. Derek's car was rocking slightly, and through the windows you could see clouds of crickets jumping around inside. The sound was incredible. 500 crickets chirping at once, amplified by the car's interior. What the heck? Derek yanked open the driver's side door, and crickets poured out like water from a broken dam. They were everywhere, on the seats, on the dashboard, in his hair as he tried to get inside and turn off the alarm. The crowd was laughing now, and someone was already filming it on their phone. Derek was frantically swatting at crickets while trying to start the car, but every time he moved, more insects jumped on him. "Oh my God!" Tiffany's voice cut through the laughter. She'd appeared from somewhere, phone in hand, live streaming the whole disaster. "Derek, what did you do?" "I didn't do anything." Derek's voice was high-pitched, panicked. "Someone put these things in my car." "But why would someone do that?" Tiffany asked, still filming. "Did you make someone angry?" That's when Derek made his second mistake of the evening. Instead of just dealing with the crickets quietly, he decided to make a scene. "This is probably that psycho ex-husband of Veronica's," he shouted, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Eli Carver! He's been stalking us because we're exposing his fake cancer story." The laughter stopped. In a small town like Millbrook, everyone knew someone who'd had cancer. Calling someone's cancer fake wasn't just offensive, it was fighting words. "What did you just say?" That was Big Jim Morrison. No relation to Tiffany, despite the name. Jim was a retired construction worker whose wife had died of breast cancer 2 years earlier. Derek, still covered in crickets, tried to backtrack. "I mean, we have evidence that he exaggerated his condition for financial gain." "You calling Eli a liar?" This from Sarah Martinez, whose brother had gone through chemo the same time I did. "I saw that boy when he was sick. Wasn't nothing fake about it." The crowd was turning hostile now, and Derek was too panicked to read the room. "Look, I'm just saying there are questions about his medical records, and now he's harassing us because we're asking those questions." That's when I decided to make my entrance. "Harassing you?" I stepped out of the crowd, making sure everyone could see me. "Derek, right? I don't think we've been properly introduced. I'm Eli Carver." Derek's face went pale. You did this." "Did what?" "Put crickets in your car." I looked around at the crowd, playing innocent. "Why would I do something like that? I don't even know you." "Because we're exposing your fraud." "What fraud?" I kept my voice calm, reasonable. "Are you talking about my cancer diagnosis? Because I've got 5 years of medical records that say it was pretty real. That's not what Veronica says." And there it was. Derek had just admitted in front of half the town that he'd been discussing my private medical information with my ex-wife, information she had no legal right to share. "Veronica says a lot of things," I replied. "She also said she'd love me in sickness and in health. But that didn't work out so well either." The crowd was murmuring now, and not in Derek's favor. Small towns don't like outsiders who come in talking trash about locals, especially locals who'd been through heck and survived it. Derek must have realized he was losing the room because he tried a different approach. "Look, all I'm saying is that there are questions about this inheritance and—" "What inheritance?" I interrupted. "You seem to know a lot about my personal business for someone I just met." Derek's mouth opened and closed like a fish. He'd painted himself into a corner, and everyone could see it. That's when Tiffany made her own crucial mistake. Still live streaming, she stepped closer to Derek and said, "Just tell them about the evidence we have." The crowd turned to look at her, and I saw recognition dawn on several faces. This was Morrison's daughter, the rich girl who'd been posting videos calling me a fake cancer patient. Evidence of what? Asked Jim Morrison, his voice dangerous now. Tiffany, oblivious to the mood shift, held up her phone. We have proof that Eli faked his cancer for attention and money. I posted all about it. The silence that followed was deafening. Then Sarah Martinez stepped forward. You posted videos calling a cancer survivor a fake? Well, yes, but my brother almost died from the same kind of cancer Eli had. You saying he was faking too? Tiffany finally seemed to realize she was in trouble. No, I'm sure your brother was really sick, but Eli was bald for 8 months, interrupted Mrs. Patterson, my elderly customer. I saw him every week when he came to get his prescriptions, watched him waste away to nothing and build himself back up again. You telling me that was all an act? The crowd was getting uglier now, and Derek was still pulling crickets out of his hair. Tiffany's live stream was capturing every second of their humiliation, broadcasting it to her thousands of followers. I decided it was time to twist the knife. You know what? I said loud enough for everyone to hear. I think there's been a misunderstanding here. Derek, Tiffany, you obviously have some concerns about my character. Why don't we settle this right now? I pulled out my phone and opened my photo gallery, scrolling to a picture from my worst day of chemo. I was skeletal, bald, and obviously dying. Then I held it up for everyone to see. This was me 3 years ago, I said. Tiffany, you want to look at this picture and tell everyone here that I was faking? Tiffany's face went white. Her live stream was still running, and she knew that thousands of people were watching her reaction. I didn't mean... You didn't mean what? To call a cancer patient a fraud? To make videos mocking someone's medical condition? To help your boyfriend here try to steal money from someone who almost died? Derek tried to step forward, but he slipped on a cricket and nearly fell. The crowd laughed, and what little dignity he had left evaporated completely. This isn't over, he said, trying to sound threatening while covered in insects. You're right, I agreed. It's not. As Derek and Tiffany retreated to his cricket-infested car, I heard someone in the crowd say, That boy's got more class than both of them put together. Another voice added, Shame on them, picking on someone who's been through what Eli has. By the time Derek managed to drive away, Cricket still jumping around inside his BMW, the entire incident had been shared across social media dozens of times. Tiffany's own livestream had captured her calling me a fake cancer patient in front of a crowd of people who knew better. The narrative was shifting, and they were too stupid to realize it. But I was just getting started. The Cricket incident went viral in the best possible way. By Saturday morning, Tiffany's live stream had been shared over 10,000 times, but not for the reasons she'd intended. People weren't laughing at me. They were laughing at Derek and disgusted by Tiffany's callous comments about cancer patients. The hashtag #CricketKarma started trending locally, with people sharing their own stories about dealing with cancer and calling out Tiffany's behavior. Several cancer support groups shared the video with comments about the importance of believing survivors and not questioning their experiences. Derek's BMW became a local legend. Even after he'd had it professionally cleaned, people claimed they could still hear crickets chirping when he drove by. Someone made a meme of his panicked face with the caption, "When karma comes in small, hopping packages." But the real victory was watching their confidence crumble. Derek started parking his car in different spots every day, looking over his shoulder like he expected another insect invasion. Tiffany's follower count dropped by 3,000 overnight, and the comments on her posts were brutal. I was enjoying their paranoia when Freeman called with an update on the inheritance case. "Interesting development," he said. "Your ex-wife's legal team has withdrawn some of their more aggressive claims. Apparently, there's been a shift in public opinion that's making their strategy less viable." "What kind of shift?" "Well, someone posted a video of her current boyfriend calling you a fake cancer patient in front of a crowd of locals. It's not playing well with potential jurors." I tried to sound surprised. "Really? That's unfortunate for them." "Indeed. However, they're not giving up. I've heard they're planning a more direct approach." "What does that mean?" "I'm not sure yet, but be careful, Eli. Desperate people do desperate things." Freeman was right to warn me. That Sunday evening, I came home from my grocery store shift to find my front door slightly ajar. Nothing was missing, but someone had definitely been inside. They'd gone through my papers, my computer, even my medicine cabinet. I was checking the basement when I heard footsteps on the porch above. Through the window, I could see two figures trying to peer through my living room curtains. Derek and Veronica, bold as brass, casing my house like amateur burglars. I crept upstairs and watched them through the peephole. Veronica was wearing all black, like she thought she was in a spy movie. Derek had a flashlight and what looked like a crowbar. They were actually planning to break into my house. I could have called the police, but that would have been too easy. Instead, I called Marty and my friend Noah, who bounced at the Pine Knot on weekends. Within 20 minutes, they were parked down the street, waiting for my signal. Derek and Veronica spent an hour walking around my house, testing windows and trying to find an easy way in. They finally settled on the back door, which had an old lock that looked vulnerable. I watched from my bedroom window as Derek worked on it with some kind of tool while Veronica kept watch. When I heard the lock give way, I texted Marty, "Now!" I positioned myself in the hallway just out of sight as Derek and Veronica crept into my kitchen. They were whispering to each other, and I could hear every word. "The legal documents should be in his office," Veronica was saying. "If we can find anything that proves he's mentally incompetent." "What about his computer?" "Check his browser history, his emails, anything that makes him look unstable." They split up, Derek heading for my living room while Veronica went toward the back bedroom I used as an office. I let them get comfortable, let them think they were in control. That's when I turned on every light in the house at once. "Well, well," I said, stepping into view. "If it isn't Bonnie and Clyde." Derek dropped his flashlight. Veronica screamed. Both of them froze like deer in headlights. "Eli!" Veronica tried to recover quickly. We thought we heard someone breaking in, so we came to check." "Through the back door? With a crowbar? How thoughtful of you." Derek was backing toward the kitchen, but that's when Noah appeared in the doorway behind him. Noah was 6'4" and built like a linebacker, and Derek nearly wet himself when he saw him. "Going somewhere?" Noah asked pleasantly. Marty came in through the front door, grinning like Christmas morning. "Well, look what we caught. A couple of breaking and entering experts." "We weren't breaking in," Derek protested. The door was open." "Funny," I said, "because I distinctly remember locking it. Marty, you brought your phone, right?" "Already recording," Marty confirmed, holding up his device. Veronica's face went white. "You can't record us without permission. Actually, in my own home, I can record whatever I want, especially when people break in uninvited." I walked closer to them, and both Derek and Veronica backed against the wall. It was satisfying to see fear in their eyes for once. "Here's what's going to happen," I said calmly. "You're going to sit down on my couch, and we're going to have a little chat about why you've been harassing me." "We haven't been harassing anyone," Veronica said, but her voice was shaking. "Really? So you didn't coach Derek on how to lie about my mental state? You didn't steal my medical records to use against me? You didn't help Tiffany make those videos calling me a fake cancer patient?" Derek and Veronica exchanged glances. They knew I had them, but they didn't know how much I knew. "I don't know what you're talking about," Derek said. I pulled out my phone and played the video I'd found on Veronica's old device. Their voices filled the room, crystal clear, as they discussed their plan to paint me as mentally incompetent. "Remember, you need to sound concerned, not malicious," Veronica's recorded voice said. "Say you're worried about his mental state, that the chemo might have affected his judgment." The real Veronica went pale as her own words played back. Derek looked like he was going to be sick. "Where did you get that?" Veronica whispered. "Does it matter? The question is, what am I going to do with it?" I paused the recording and looked at both of them. They were sitting on my couch now, looking small and frightened. Nothing like the confident predators who'd been stalking me for weeks. "You know," I continued, "I was going to be civilized about this whole inheritance thing. Hire a lawyer, present my case, let the courts decide. But then you had to make it personal." "Eli, please," Veronica said, and for a moment she sounded like the woman I'd once loved. "We can work something out." "Work something out? Like you worked something out when you left me to die alone? Like you worked something out when you took half of everything I owned while I was too sick to fight back?" Derek tried to stand up, but Noah stepped forward and he sat back down quickly. "Look, man, this is between you and your ex-wife. I don't want any trouble." "Trouble?" I laughed. "Derek, you called me a fake cancer patient in front of half the town. You've been planning to commit perjury in court. You just broke into my house. I'd say you're already in trouble." I walked over to my computer and opened a new email. "Let's see. Who should I send this video to first? Your boss at Morrison Pharmaceuticals? The local newspaper? Maybe the police?" "Wait!" Derek jumped up, panic in his voice. You can't send that to Morrison. I'll lose my job. Probably, but that's not really my problem, is it? Veronica was crying now, real tears, not the fake ones she used to turn on when she wanted something. Eli, please, I know I hurt you, but this won't bring back what we had. Bring it back. I stared at her. Veronica, I wouldn't take you back if you were the last woman on earth. This isn't about getting back together. This is about justice. What do you want? Derek asked desperately. I pretended to think about it. Well, for starters, you're both going to withdraw your claims against my inheritance. You're going to admit publicly that you lied about my medical condition, and you're going to stay away from me. And if we do that, you'll delete the video. I smiled. Oh, I'm keeping the video. Think of it as insurance. But if you behave yourselves, I might not share it with the world. Derek and Veronica huddled together, whispering frantically. Finally, Veronica looked up at me with hatred in her eyes. Fine, we'll withdraw the legal challenge. And we'll correct the record about your medical situation. Publicly. Derek nodded miserably. Publicly. Excellent. I opened my front door. Now, get out of my house before I change my mind about calling the police. They practically ran to Derek's BMW, which still had a few crickets jumping around in the back seat. As they drove away, I could hear Veronica screaming at Derek about how he'd ruined everything. Marty was grinning as he put away his phone. That was beautiful, cuz. You got them dead to rights. It's not over yet, I said. They'll try something else. People like that always do. Noah clapped me on the shoulder. Well, when they do, you know where to find us. After my friends left, I sat in my living room thinking about how good it had felt to see fear in my ex-wife's eyes. The old me would have felt guilty about that. The old me would have worried about being too harsh, too vindictive. But the old me had never been betrayed like this. The old me had never had to fight for his life while the person who was supposed to love him was already planning her exit strategy. The new me understood something important. Sometimes the only way to stop bullies is to become something they're afraid of. And I was just getting started. True to form, Derek and Veronica didn't keep their word. Instead of withdrawing their legal challenge quietly, they decided to escalate the situation in the most public way possible. That Wednesday, I woke up to find my face on the front page of the Millbrook Gazette. The headline read, "Local Man's Inheritance Claim Disputed by Ex-Wife." The article, clearly fed information by Veronica's legal team, painted me as a potentially unstable individual whose cancer treatment may have affected his judgment. But the real slap in the face was the quote from Derek. "We're just concerned about Eli's well-being. The stress of managing such a large sum of money could be detrimental to someone who's been through what he has." They were doubling down, using my cancer against me in the most public forum possible. That afternoon, Tiffany posted a new video, this one more carefully scripted than her previous efforts. She didn't call me a fake cancer patient directly, but she raised questions about my fitness to receive the inheritance, suggesting that cancer survivors often suffered from depression and poor judgment that could last for years. The video was slick, professionally edited and designed to look like a concerned citizen, raising legitimate questions rather than a spoiled rich girl trying to help her friends steal money. But they'd made a crucial mistake. They'd underestimated how much the people of Millbrook hated being manipulated by outsiders. By Thursday morning, the Gazette's comment section was flooded with responses from locals defending me. Sarah Martinez wrote a detailed account of her brother's cancer treatment and recovery, emphasizing how sharp and capable cancer survivors could be. Mrs. Patterson shared her own story about her late husband's battle with the disease. Most importantly, Big Jim Morrison wrote a scathing response about people who questioned cancer patients' credibility for financial gain. But I wasn't content to let others fight my battles. It was time for the final phase of my plan. That evening, I called Freeman and told him I wanted to hold a public meeting to address the concerns about my inheritance claim. He tried to talk me out of it, saying it was too risky, but I insisted. I wanted Derek, Veronica, and Tiffany to show their faces in front of the entire town. We scheduled the meeting for Saturday evening at the Millbrook Community Center. I made sure word got out through all the right channels, the local newspaper, social media, and most importantly, the gossip network that ran through the Pine Knot. Derek and Veronica couldn't resist the opportunity. They probably thought they could ambush me in a public forum, present their evidence of my mental instability, and turn the town against me. They had no idea what I had planned for them. Saturday evening, the community center was packed. It seemed like half the town had shown up, along with a reporter from the regional newspaper and even a camera crew from the local TV station. Word had spread that there was going to be a showdown, and people love a good fight. I arrived early and set up a laptop and projector, telling people I wanted to present some evidence of my own. Derek, Veronica, and Tiffany arrived together, looking confident and well-dressed, like they were attending a business presentation rather than a public confrontation. Freeman introduced me and explained the basic situation, the inheritance, the legal challenge, and the public questions that had been raised about my fitness to receive the money. Eli has asked for this opportunity to address the community directly, Freeman said. He wants to respond to the concerns that have been raised and present some information of his own. I stood up and looked out at the crowd. I saw familiar faces from the Pine Knot, customers from my various jobs, neighbors I'd known for years. These were my people, and they were here to see me fight for what was mine. Thank you all for coming, I began. I know there's been a lot of talk lately about my inheritance claim and whether I'm mentally fit to receive this money. Some people have suggested that my cancer treatment affected my judgment, that I'm not capable of making sound decisions. I paused and looked directly at Derek and Veronica, who were sitting in the front row. I want to address those concerns head on, but first, I think you should know exactly who's been making these claims and why. I clicked to my first slide, a photo of Derek, Veronica, and Tiffany at an upscale restaurant, clearly celebrating something. This photo was taken 3 weeks ago, the same day that Derek Ames and my ex-wife Veronica filed their legal challenge to my inheritance. They were celebrating what they thought would be an easy victory. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Derek's face was already turning red. Now, you might wonder why these three people are so interested in my mental health. Let me show you. The next slide was a screenshot of Derek's text messages with his mother, the ones I'd overheard during his Uber ride. Derek Ames is approximately $50,000 in debt. He's been skimming from his expense account at Morrison Pharmaceuticals to maintain his lifestyle. He needs money desperately, and he sees my inheritance as his salvation. Derek shot to his feet. You can't share private communications. That's illegal. Actually, Freeman interjected smoothly, Mr. Carver obtained this information through legal means during the discovery process. It wasn't entirely true, but Derek didn't know that. I clicked to the next slide, financial records that Marty had helped me obtain through less than legal means. Veronica Carver, my ex-wife, is also in financial trouble. Her marketing job pays well, but she's been living beyond her means for years. She owes over $30,000 in credit card debt and took out a second mortgage on her townhouse last year. Veronica was shaking her head frantically, but the numbers were right there on the screen for everyone to see. And Tiffany Morrison, the young woman who's been making videos questioning my cancer diagnosis, doesn't get access to her trust fund for 4 more years. She's been relying on her friends to support her lifestyle. I clicked to the next slide, the video I'd found on Veronica's old phone. But here's the really interesting part. Let me show you how they planned to steal my money. The audio filled the room, crystal clear. Veronica coaching Derek on how to lie about my mental state, discussing how to use my medical records against me, planning their campaign to paint me as incompetent. The crowd was getting ugly now. People were turning to stare at Derek and Veronica with disgust and anger. You recorded us illegally, Veronica shouted. Actually, you recorded yourselves, I replied calmly. This video was on your phone, Veronica. You made it for your own records. I clicked to the next slide, screenshots of their social media posts and text messages. Here's Tiffany Morrison calling cancer patients attention seekers and fakers. Here's Derek Ames discussing how to manipulate public opinion against me. And here's my ex-wife sharing my private medical information with people who had no right to see it. The crowd was openly hostile now. Someone in the back shouted, "Shame on you!" Others were calling Derek and Veronica liars and thieves, but I wasn't done yet. Now, let me address the question of my mental fitness, I said, clicking to a new slide. These are my recent medical records, including a comprehensive psychological evaluation I underwent last month. The evaluation, which I'd requested specifically for this moment, showed that I was mentally sound, emotionally stable, and fully capable of managing my own affairs. I've also brought character witnesses who can speak to my judgment and capabilities. Mrs. Patterson stood up. I've known Eli for 5 years. He's fixed my car, helped me with my computer, and never once charged me more than fair price. If that's not good judgment, I don't know what is. Sarah Martinez was next. Eli drove my kids to school every day during my brother's cancer treatment, never asked for gas money, never complained. He's got more integrity than anyone in this room. One by one, people stood up to vouch for my character. My boss from the grocery store talked about my reliability. Customers praised my honesty. Even Big Jim Morrison, who barely knew me, stood up to say that anyone who'd survived what I'd survived and still treated people with kindness deserved respect, not harassment. Derek, Veronica, and Tiffany were sinking lower in their seats with each testimonial. The camera crew was capturing every moment, and I could see the reporter frantically taking notes. Finally, I clicked to my last slide. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to be very clear about something. This inheritance isn't about the money. It's about justice. The slide showed a photo of me during my cancer treatment. Bald, thin, obviously sick, but with my eyes still bright and determined. When I was diagnosed with cancer at 29, my wife left me. She didn't just leave, she took half of everything I owned while I was too sick to fight back. She told people I was too expensive to save. She abandoned me when I needed her most. The room was completely silent now. I survived cancer without her help. I rebuilt my life without her support. And now, when something good finally happens to me, she wants to take that away too. I looked directly at Veronica, who was crying now. But I'm not the same man you left to die, Veronica. I'm stronger now, I'm smarter, and I'm not going to let you destroy me again. I turned back to the crowd. The inheritance I'm claiming will go toward helping other cancer patients who can't afford treatment. It will fund research into better therapies. It will make sure that no one else has to choose between bankruptcy and survival. The applause started slowly, then built to a roar. People were standing now, cheering not just for me, but for everyone who'd ever been knocked down and found the strength to get back up. Derek, Veronica, and Tiffany tried to leave quietly, but the crowd wasn't having it. People blocked their path, demanding explanations, calling them out for their lies and manipulation. "How dare you question a cancer survivor's credibility?" someone shouted. "You should be ashamed of yourselves," called another voice. Derek pushed through the crowd roughly, accidentally knocking over an elderly woman in his haste to escape. That was his final mistake. Big Jim Morrison grabbed Derek by the collar and lifted him off his feet. "You just pushed my wife, you piece of garbage." "It was an accident," Derek squeaked. "So's this," Jim said and punched Derek square in the nose. Derek went down hard, a red trickle streaming from his face. The crowd cheered. Someone was definitely filming it. Veronica and Tiffany managed to escape in the chaos, but Derek had to be helped to his feet by the paramedics who'd been called for the elderly woman he'd knocked over. As the crowd dispersed, people kept coming up to shake my hand, to tell me they were proud of me, to say they'd always known I was a good man who'd been treated unfairly. The reporter from the regional paper interviewed me outside the community center. "Mr. Carver, how does it feel to have your community support?" "It feels like justice," I said simply. "What's next for you?" I smiled, thinking about the final phase of my plan. Now I make sure they can never hurt anyone else the way they tried to hurt me. The video of Derek getting punched by Big Jim went viral within hours. #JusticeForEllie started trending regionally, then nationally. Cancer support groups shared the story. Survivors from across the country reached out to offer their support. Derek was arrested for assault after the video showed him deliberately pushing the elderly woman. His employer, Morrison Pharmaceuticals, fired him immediately to avoid the negative publicity. Tiffany's social media accounts were flooded with angry comments from cancer survivors and their families. She lost thousands more followers, and eventually had to shut down her accounts entirely. Veronica's marketing firm put her on administrative leave, pending an investigation into her conduct. Her professional reputation was destroyed. But the best part came 2 weeks later, when Freeman called with the final news. "The inheritance case has been resolved," he said. "Derek and Veronica have withdrawn all claims and admitted publicly that their challenges were without merit. And the money? $63 million minus legal fees? It's yours, Eli." I sat in my small living room looking around at my secondhand furniture and stack of medical bills and started laughing. I laughed until I cried, until my sides hurt, until I couldn't breathe. I'd won. I'd actually won. But more than that, I'd proven something important to myself. I wasn't a victim anymore. I wasn't the broken man who'd been abandoned during his darkest hour. I was a survivor. And survivors don't just endure, they overcome. The next morning, I made my first donation from the inheritance, $1 million to the cancer treatment center that had saved my life. The second donation went to a fund for patients who couldn't afford their medical bills. The third donation was the most satisfying of all. I gave $500,000 to the Millbrook Community Center, with one condition. They had to put up a plaque thanking Derek Ames, Veronica Carver, and Tiffany Morrison for their unwitting contribution to cancer research. Their names would be on that wall forever, reminding everyone who saw it that sometimes the best revenge is simply outliving your enemies and thriving in spite of them. I kept enough money to pay off my debts, buy a decent house, and live comfortably for the rest of my life. But the real treasure wasn't the inheritance. It was the knowledge that I'd faced down my demons and won. Cancer had tried to end me, and I'd survived. My ex-wife had tried to destroy me, and I'd thrived. Derek and Tiffany had tried to humiliate me, and I'd turned their own tools against them. I was no longer Eli Carver, the abandoned cancer patient. I was Eli Carver, the man who'd fought back and won. And that felt better than any amount of money ever could.